The Battle of Marathon. Excerpt from Book 6 of the Histories by Herodotus. Sailing from Delos, the Persians proceeded to make the rounds of the other islands, touching at each, pressing troops for service, and taking the islanders' children as hostages. They also visited Carystus, and when the people of the place refused to give hostages or supply men to fight against their neighbours, by which they meant Athens and Eretria, they laid siege to the town and destroyed the crops in the surrounding country, until the Carystians were forced to do what the Persians demanded. In Eretria, at the news of the Persian approach, the people at once called to Athens for help, and the call was not refused, for the Athenians sent to their assistance the 4,000 men whom they had previously settled on the estates of the wealthier Chalcidians. Nevertheless, in spite of the appeals to Athens, things at Eretria were not in a healthy state. There was no firm resolve, and councils were divided. One party proposed abandoning the town and taking refuge in the Euboean hills. Another, having an eye to some gain from the Persians, was preparing to betray the city. When Aeschines, son of Nothon, one of the leading men of Eretria, came to know of what was afoot, he at once proceeded to act. He disclosed the whole situation to those of the Athenians who had already arrived, and urged them to go home again before they were involved in the catastrophe that was bound to come. They took Aeschines' advice, and got safe away by crossing to Oropus. Meanwhile, the Persian fleet brought up at Taminae, Chorere, and Agilia, all three places in Eretrian territory. The horses were immediately put ashore, and preparations for assault began. The Eretrians had no intention of leaving their defences to meet the coming attack in the open. Their one concern, the proposal not to abandon the town having been carried, was to defend their walls, if they could. The assault soon came, and there was weight behind it. For 6 days fighting continued, with many killed on both sides. Then, on the 7th, 2 well-known Eretrians, Euphorobus, the son of Alcimachus, and Philagras, the son of Cineas, betrayed the town to the enemy. The Persians entered, and stripped the temples bare, and burnt them in revenge for the burnt temples of Sardis, and in accordance with Darius's orders, carried off all the inhabitants as slaves. Having mastered Eretria, the Persians waited a few days, and then sailed for Attica, flushed with victory, and confident that they would treat Athens in the same way. The part of Attic territory nearest Eretria, and also the best ground for cavalry to maneuver in, was at Marathon. To Marathon, therefore, Hippias, the son of Pisistratus, directed the invading army, and the Athenians, as soon as the news arrived, hurried to meet it. The Athenian troops were commanded by 10 generals, of whom the 10th was Miltiades. Miltiades' father, Cimon, the son of Stesagoras, had been banished from Athens by Pisistratus, the son of Hippocrates. While in exile he had the good fortune to win the chariot race at Olympia, thereby gaining the same distinction as his half-brother Miltiades. At the next games, he won the prize again with the same team of mares, but this time waived his victory in favour of Pisistratus, and for allowing the latter to be proclaimed the winner, was given leave to return to Athens. At a later Olympic festival, he won a 3rd time, still with the same 4 mares. Soon after, Pisistratus having died, he was murdered by Pisistratus's sons, who sent some men to waylay him one night near the council house. He was buried outside of Athens, beyond what is called the Sunk Road, and opposite his grave were buried the mares which had thrice won the chariot race. This triple victory had once before been achieved by a single team, that of Euagoras the Laconian, but there are no other instances of it. At the time of Cimon's death, Stesagoras, the elder of his 2 sons, was living in the Chersonese with Miltiades, his uncle, and the younger son, who was called Miltiades after the founder of the settlement in the Chersonese, was with his father in Athens. It was this Miltiades who is now an Athenian general. He had recently escaped from the Chersonese and twice nearly lost his life. Once when the Phoenicians chased him as far as Imbros in their anxiety to catch him and take him to Darius, and again when, after escaping that danger and getting home to what looked like safety, he found his enemies waiting for him, and was prosecuted in the courts for his tyranny in the Chersonese. But he escaped this too, and after the trial was elected a general by the people. Before they left the city, the Athenian generals sent off a message to Sparta. The messenger was an Athenian named Phidippides, a professional long-distance runner. According to the account he gave the Athenians on his return, Phidippides met the god Pan on Mount Parathenium, above Tega. Pan, he said, called to him by name and told him to ask the Athenians why they paid him no attention, in spite of his friendliness towards them, and the fact that he had often been useful to them in the past, and would be so again in the future. The Athenians believed Phidippides' story, and when their affairs were once more in a prosperous state, they built a shrine to Pan under the Acropolis, and from the time his message was received, they have held an annual ceremony, with a torch race and sacrifices, to court his protection. On the occasion of which I speak, when Phidippides, that is, was sent on his mission by the Athenian commanders, and said that he saw Pan, he reached Sparta the day after he left Athens, and delivered his message to the Spartan government. "Men of Sparta," the message ran, "the Athenians ask you to help them, and not to stand by while the most ancient city of Greece is crushed and enslaved by a foreign invader. For even now Eretria has been enslaved, and Greece is weaker by the loss of one fine city. The Spartans, though moved by the appeal, and willing to send help to Athens, were unable to send it promptly because they did not wish to break their law. It was the 9th day of the month, and they said they could not take the field until the moon was full, so they waited for the full moon, and meanwhile Hippias, the son of Pisistratus, guided the Persians to Marathon. The previous night Hippias had dreamed that he was sleeping with his mother, and he supposed that the dream meant he would return to Athens, recover his power, and die peacefully at home in old age. So much for his interpretation. On the following day, when he was acting as a guide to the invaders, he put the prisoners from Eretria on shore on Agilia, an island belonging to the town of Styra, led the fleet to its anchorage at Marathon, and got the troops into position when they had disembarked. While he was busy with all of this, he happened to be seized by an unusually violent fit of sneezing and coughing, and, as he was an oldish man, and most of his teeth were loose, he coughed one of them right out of his mouth. It fell somewhere in the sand, and though he searched and searched in his efforts to find it, it was nowhere to be seen. Hippias then turned to his companions and said with a deep groan, "This land is not ours. We shall never be able to conquer it. The only part I ever had in it, my tooth possesses." So the meaning of the dream was now clear to him. The Athenian troops were drawn up on a piece of ground sacred to Heracles, when they were joined by the Plataeans, who came to support them with every available man. Some time before this, the Plataeans had surrendered their independence to the Athenians, who had, in their turn, already rendered service to Plataea on many occasions and in difficult circumstances. The way it happened was this. Plataea was being hard-pressed by Thebes, and as Cleomenes, the son of Anaxandrides, happened to be the first in the neighbourhood with the Spartan army, the Plataeans first thought of putting themselves into Spartan hands. The Spartans, however, refused the offer. "We live too far apart, and an alliance with us would be but cold comfort to you. You might be carried off into slavery several times over before any of us even heard of it. Our advice is that you make your surrender to Athens. Athens is your neighbour, and the Athenian help is by no means to be despised." The advice did not proceed from the goodwill towards Plataea, but merely from the Spartans' desire to embroil Athens in quarrels with the Boeotians. Nevertheless, the advice was taken. Representatives from Plataea, while the Athenians were engaged in offering a sacrifice to the 12 gods, came and sat by the altar, to make their solemn request, and the act of surrender was completed. When the Thebans heard what the Plataeans had done, they at once sent an army to fight against them. The Athenians hurried to their defence, and a fight was on the point of beginning when the Corinthians intervened. They came up, and as both sides submitted the dispute to their arbitration, they fixed the boundary between the two countries, with the condition that there should be no interference from Thebes with any Boeotians who might not wish to belong to the Boeotian state. The Corinthians, after making this decision, left for home, and the Athenians had also started on their return march when they were set upon by the Boeotians. In the fight which ensued, the Athenians were victorious, and they followed up their victory by crossing the borderline which the Corinthians had fixed for Plataea, and making the river Asopus the frontier between the territory of Thebes on one side and of Plataea and Hysaea on the other. These were the circumstances under which the people of Plataea put themselves into Athenian hands, and which led to their coming to the support of Athens at Marathon. Amongst the Athenian commanders, opinion was divided. Some were against risking a battle, on the ground that the Athenian force was too small to stand a chance of success. Others, and amongst them Miltiades, urged it. It seemed for a time as if the more faint-hearted policy would be adopted, and so it would have been but for the action of Miltiades. In addition to the 10 generals, there was another person entitled to vote, namely the Polemarch, or War Archon, appointed by lot. This office, which formerly carried an equal vote in military decisions with the generals, was held at this time by Callimachus of the deme Aphidni. To Callimachus, therefore, Miltiades turned. "It is now in your hands, Callimachus," he said, "either to enslave Athens, or to make her free, and to leave behind you for all future generations a memory more glorious than even Harmodius and Aristogeiton left. Never in our history have we Athenians been in such peril as now. If we submit to the Persians, Hippias will be restored to power, and there is little doubt what misery must then ensue. But if we fight and win, then this city of ours may well grow to preeminence amongst all the cities of Greece. If you ask me how this can be, and how the decision rests with you, I will tell you. We commanders are 10 in number, and we are not agreed upon what action to take. Half of us are for a battle, half of us against. If we refuse to fight, I have little doubt that the result will be bitter dissension. Our purpose will be shaken, and we shall submit to Persia. But if we fight before the rot can show itself in any of us, then, if God gives us fair play, we can not only fight, but win. Yours is the decision. All hangs upon you. Vote on my side, and our country will be free, yes, and the first city of Greece. But if you support those who have voted against fighting, that happiness will be denied you. You will get the opposite." Miltiades' words prevailed, and by the vote of Callimachus, the war archon, the decision to fight was made. The generals held the presiding position in succession, each for a day, and those of them who had voted with Miltiades offered, when their turn for duty came, to surrender it to him. Miltiades accepted the offer, but would not fight until the day came when he would in any case have presided. When it did come, the Athenian army moved into position for the coming struggle. The right wing was commanded by Callimachus, for it was the regular practice at that time in Athens that the war archon should lead on the right wing. Then followed the tribes, in their regular order, and finally on the left wing were the Plataeans. Ever since the Battle of Marathon, when the Athenians offer sacrifice at their quadrennial festival, the herald links the names of Athens and Plataea in the prayer for the gods' blessing. One result of the disposition of Athenian troops before the battle was the weakening of their centre by the effort to extend the line sufficiently to cover the whole Persian front. The two wings were strong, but the line in the centre was only a few ranks deep. The dispositions made, and the preliminary sacrifice promising success, the word was given to move, and the Athenians advanced at a run towards the enemy, not less than a mile away. The Persians, seeing the attack developing at the double, prepared to meet it, thinking it suicidal madness for the Athenians to risk an assault with so small a force, rushing in with no support from either cavalry or archers. Well, that is what they imagined. Nevertheless, the Athenians came on, closed with the enemy all along the line, and fought in a way not to be forgotten. They were the first Greeks, so far as we know, to charge at a run, and the first who dared to look without flinching at Persian dress and the men who wore it, for until that day came, no Greek would even hear the word Persian without terror. The struggle at Marathon was long drawn out. In the centre, held by the Persians themselves and the Sacae, the advantage was with the foreigners, who were so far successful as to break the Greek line and pursue the fugitives inland from the sea. But the Athenians on one wing and the Plataeans on the other were both victorious. Having got the upper hand, they left the defeated enemy to make their escape, and then, drawing the two wings in together into a single unit, they turned their attention to the Persians who had broken through the centre. Here again they were triumphant, chasing the routed enemy and cutting them down until they came to the sea, and men were calling for fire and taking hold of the ships. It was in this phase of the struggle that the war archon Callimachus was killed, fighting bravely, and also Stesilaus, the son of Thrasylaus, one of the generals. Cynegeirus too, the son of Euphorion, had his hand cut off with an axe as he was getting hold of a ship's stern, and so he lost his life, together with many other well-known Athenians. The Athenians secured in this way 7 ships, but the rest got off, and the Persians aboard them, after picking up the Eretrian prisoners whom they had left on Aegylia, laid a course around Sunium for Athens, which they hoped to reach in advance of the Athenian army. In Athens, the Alcmonidae were accused of suggesting this move. They had, it was said, an understanding with the Persians, and raised a shield as a signal to them when they were already on board. While the Persian fleet was on its way around Sunium, the Athenians hurried back with all possible speed to save their city, and succeeded in reaching it before the arrival of the Persians. Just as at Marathon, the Athenian camp had been a plot of ground sacred to Heracles, so now they fixed their camp on another, also sacred to the same god, at Cynosarges. When the Persian fleet appeared, it lay at anchor for a while off Phalerum, at the time the chief harbour of Athens, and then sailed back to Asia. In the Battle of Marathon, some 6,400 Persians were killed, and the losses of the Athenians were 192. During the action a marvellous thing happened. Epizalus, the son of Cuphagoras, an Athenian soldier, was fighting bravely when he suddenly lost the sight of both eyes, though nothing had touched him anywhere, neither sword, spear, nor missile. From that moment he continued blind as long as he lived. I have heard that in speaking about what has happened to him, he used to say that he thought he was opposed by a man of great stature in heavy armour, whose beard overshadowed his shield, but the phantom passed him by, and killed the man at his side.